The sky above Seoul turned dark at exactly 3:47 p.m. Not the natural darkness of storm clouds, but something else. Something wrong. Major was drinking coffee in his office when the alarm started screaming. Every screen in the building switched to the same image: 12 massive objects hanging in Earth's orbit, each one larger than a city. Dropped his cup. The coffee spread across the floor like blood, but he didn't notice. His eyes were locked on the screens. The objects weren't meteorites or space debris. They were ships, alien ships. Across the city, in a small government building, was working late on encrypted communications when her computer went crazy. Lines of code scrolled across her screen faster than she could read. Then everything stopped. A message appeared in perfect English, Chinese, Korean, and 50 other languages simultaneously. Attention, primitive species. This planet is now designated Resource Node 7749C. You have 72 hours to surrender all military capabilities and submit to processing. Resistance will result in extinction. This is your only warning. The message was signed by someone called Commander of the Halcyon Empire. His hands shook as she started recording everything. She was an intelligence officer trained to stay calm during crisis situations, but this was beyond any crisis she had imagined. She grabbed her phone and started making calls. Within minutes, every government on Earth knew the same terrible truth. They were not alone in the universe, and their new neighbors wanted them dead. High above Earth, on the International Space Station Horizon 7, Captain floated in the observation module and stared at the alien fleet. He had been in space for 6 months, conducting research and enjoying the peaceful view of his home planet. Now that peace was shattered. "Captain, you need to see this," Sora called from the engineering bay. She was pulling up readings from the station's sensors. "These ships, their energy signatures are massive, but there's something strange. The patterns are identical. Every ship uses the exact same design." The station's astrophysicist pushed himself over to look at the data. His face went pale. "That's not normal. When you build a fleet, you improve designs, you adapt, you innovate. These ships look like they were all built from the same template thousands of years ago." "What does that mean?" asked. "It means they've never needed to change," said quietly. "It means they always win." Down in a cramped apartment filled with computer equipment, was typing frantically. His fingers flew across 3 keyboards at once. Next to him, his sister was on the phone with someone in the military, her voice calm despite the chaos. Was a hacker, not the criminal kind, but the kind government secretly hired to test their security systems. Now he was trying to do something impossible: find a way into the alien network. His screens showed dozens of failed attempts. The alien systems were unlike anything human technology had created. "Any luck?" asked, hanging up the phone. "They're not even acknowledging our attempts to communicate," said. "It's like we're insects trying to talk to humans. They don't care what we have to say." Walked to the window. She could see people in the streets below, some running, some standing still in shock, all staring at the sky. "The military is scrambling," she said. "Every country is preparing for war, but I've seen the simulations. We can't win, not with conventional weapons." "Then we find an unconventional way," replied, his eyes never leaving his screens. The 72 hours began counting down. On every device connected to the internet, a timer appeared. No one could remove it or shut it off. The aliens wanted humanity to watch every second slip away. Major assembled his tactical response unit in an underground bunker. 50 soldiers, the best Korea had to offer, all staring at him with questions in their eyes. Questions he couldn't answer. "I won't lie to you," said. "We don't know what we're facing. We don't know if we can win. But I know this: we're not going to surrender without a fight. 72 hours from now, whatever happens, happens. Until then, we prepare." The soldiers nodded. They were scared, could see it in their faces, but they were also determined. That was the thing about humans, thought. They didn't run from fear, they ran toward it. Worked through the night, breaking down every piece of alien communication she could intercept. Most of it was encrypted beyond her ability to crack, but fragments came through. Words that made her blood run cold. The Halcyon Empire saw humans as carbon forms. They called Earth's defenders precognitive organisms. They were discussing the invasion like it was a routine mining operation. But one fragment gave her hope. It was a conversation between two alien commanders. They were complaining about scheduled delays. The invasion of Earth was behind timeline because they had to wait for orbital positioning. The Halcyon, for all their power, still had to follow physics. They could be delayed. They could be inconvenienced. If they could be inconvenienced, thought, maybe they could be stopped. On Horizon 7 gathered his small crew. Besides Sara and there were 4 others, 2 more scientists and 2 engineers, 7 humans on a small space station, watching as an empire prepared to destroy their world. "We're not soldiers," said, "but we're the only humans in position to do anything before they land. Sara, I need options, anything. I don't care how crazy it sounds." Sara and exchanged looks. "There might be something," Sara said slowly, "but it's suicide." "Everything's suicide right now," replied. "Tell me." The hours ticked down. 68 hours remaining. 67 hours. 66 hours. The world watched and waited. Militaries moved into position. Civilians evacuated cities or chose to stay. Some people prayed. Some people partied, deciding to enjoy their last days. Some people, like and worked without sleeping, searching for any advantage, any weakness, any hope. In orbit, Commander observed the planet below with satisfaction. The humans were panicking, as expected. Their military movements were primitive and predictable. In 72 hours, the Halcyon ground forces would land, and this would be over quickly. 47 worlds had fallen before Earth. Number 48 would be no different. But made one mistake. He assumed that because humans were primitive, they were predictable. He assumed that because they were weak, they would break easily. He assumed that because his empire had never lost, they never would. He didn't understand that humans were dangerous precisely because they were primitive, because they were unpredictable, because they didn't know when to give up. The countdown continued, and both sides prepared for war. Hour 68 of the countdown, the Halcyon Empire made their move. A single ship detached from the fleet and descended toward Earth. It landed in the Gobi Desert, far from major cities, in an area where satellites could watch but armies couldn't reach quickly. Within minutes, the ship opened, and thousands of machines poured out onto the sand. Major watched the satellite feed with growing dread. The machines moved like insects, each one the size of a car, with multiple legs and weapons mounted on their frames. They spread out in perfect geometric patterns, building structures with impossible speed. Within an hour, there was a base. Within 2 hours, it looked like a city. "They're automated war machines," explained over the video call. She had been analyzing the footage. "Drones, no living pilots. They build themselves, repair themselves, and learn from every encounter. The more you fight them, the smarter they get." "So how do we fight them?" asked. "I don't know," admitted, "but you're about to find out. Command is sending you in." Closed his eyes for a moment. Then he opened them and looked at his team. 50 soldiers who trusted him to lead them. 50 people who were about to face an enemy no human had ever fought before. "Gear up," he said simply. 6 hours later and his unit were in the desert. The alien base glowed on the horizon, strange lights cutting through the darkness. They moved in small groups, using the sand dunes for cover. The plan was simple: get close, observe the enemy, and try to find a weakness. Nobody expected them to survive. The first drone spotted them from 2 kilometers away. It moved faster than anything that size should move, closing the distance in seconds. Soldiers opened fire. Bullets sparked off the machine's armor but didn't slow it down. The drone's weapons charged up with an electric hum. Then Private Minu did something unexpected. He didn't retreat. He ran forward directly at the drone and threw himself underneath it. The drone's weapons fired, but Minu was too close in its blind spot. He attached an explosive charge to its underside and rolled away. The explosion tore the drone apart. Stared, it had worked. It shouldn't have worked, but it had. "Did you see that?" His voice crackled through the radio back at headquarters. She was watching through their helmet cameras. The drone didn't account for suicide tactics. Its programming assumes enemies will try to preserve their own lives. It can't predict someone who doesn't care about survival. "We care about survival," said, checking on Minu, who was bruised but alive. "We just care about each other more." More drones were coming, dozens of them. Units scattered and fought in ways no military manual taught. They were chaotic, unpredictable, and reckless. They covered each other's retreats. They doubled back for wounded soldiers. They made decisions that looked tactically insane. And the drones started making mistakes. A machine would target a soldier, calculate the perfect shot, and fire, only to have two other soldiers attack from angles it hadn't predicted because they should have been protecting themselves. Another drone would move to cut off a retreat route, only to find the humans had already retreated in a completely different direction for no logical reason. By dawn's unit had destroyed 12 drones. They had also lost 8 soldiers. The math said they were losing, but they were still alive and the drones were confused. High above Earth, Captain was preparing to do something insane. "This is genuinely the worst plan I've ever heard," said for the 10th time. "You're the one who suggested it," replied, strapping himself into the pilot's seat. "I suggested it as a joke to show how desperate we were." Sara floated over with the calculations. "If we're doing this, we need to do it now. The alien ship's orbit will bring it within range in 30 minutes. After that, the angle is wrong." The plan was simple and suicidal. Horizon 7 had limited fuel reserves, stored in tanks that were designed for safety but could be destabilized. If they could get close enough to one of the smaller alien ships, they could deliberately cause a catastrophic fuel explosion. The blast wouldn't destroy the alien ship, but it might damage it. The problem was they would have to abandon Horizon 7. Their home for the past 6 months would be sacrificed, and they might not make it to the escape pods in time. "Last chance to back out," said. Nobody backed out. They programmed the station's thrusters to push it toward the alien ship on a collision course. The Halcyon detected the station immediately and moved to destroy it with precision weapons. But Sara had anticipated this. She had routed all the station's power to the forward shields, the ones designed to protect against micrometeorites. It wasn't much, but it bought them seconds. Seconds were enough. The alien weapons tore into Horizon 7, ripping through modules and corridors that had been home to humans for years. But the station kept coming, and his crew scrambled to the escape pods as the station shook apart around them. "Go, go, go," Sara shouted. They launched just as Horizon 7 crashed into the alien ship's shields. For a moment, nothing happened. The alien shields held. Then calculations proved correct. The fuel tanks didn't just explode. They created a cascade reaction, a chain of explosions that released energy in unpredictable patterns. The chaos overwhelmed the shield's ability to distribute the force evenly. The shield buckled, just for a second, just enough. The alien ship survived, but a section of its hull was damaged. Atmosphere vented into space. The massive vessel was forced to retreat from its orbital position to make emergency repairs. In the escape pods, tumbling toward Earth's atmosphere, and his crew watched in disbelief. They had heard it. One space station crewed by 7 scientists had damaged a ship designed to destroy planets. "They're not invincible," Sara whispered. Down In suddenly sat up straight. "I'm in." Rushed over, into what? "Their network, not the important parts, but I'm seeing data. was right. Every drone that fights, it sends information back to the main fleet. Battle reports, tactical assessments, learning algorithms. They're all connected. Can you disrupt it? No, said slowly, a smile creeping across his face. But I can feed them false information. I can teach their machines the wrong lessons. Understood immediately. If the drones were learning from every battle, and if could corrupt that learning, they could make the entire alien army instead of smarter. Do it, she said. Hour 70. Commander reviewed the battle reports with growing confusion. The humans had inflicted minor casualties on his forces. That was unexpected but not concerning. What concerned him was that his war machines were reporting contradictory data. Some drones said humans always fled from superior force. Others said humans never retreated. Some said humans fought in coordinated units. Others said human tactics were completely random. The learning algorithms were producing conflicting strategies. For the first time in 10,000 years of conquest, Halcyon war machines were hesitating, uncertain which protocol to follow. Made a decision. The preliminary assault had taken longer than planned, but it didn't matter. In 2 hours, the countdown would end and the full invasion would begin. 100,000 war machines would land across the planet simultaneously. Whatever tricks the humans had learned, whatever minor victories they had achieved, would be meaningless. He was absolutely certain of victory, and that certainty would be his first mistake. Back in the desert, Major and his surviving soldiers watched the sun rise over the alien base. They were exhausted, injured, and outnumbered 1,000 to 1. But they were smiling, because for the first time since the aliens arrived, humanity had learned an important truth. The enemy could bleed. Hour 72. The invasion began. Across 12 locations on Earth, massive Halcyon ships descended through the atmosphere. They landed in deserts, tundras, and remote areas far from major cities. Within minutes, each ship disgorged tens of thousands of war machines. The drones spread out like metal floods, heading toward the nearest population centers. Commander watched from orbit, confident. His forces outnumbered the humans 1,000,000 to 1. His technology was thousands of years more advanced. Every simulation showed the same result. Earth would fall within 7 days. The humans would fight, suffer losses, and surrender. That's what every species did. But the humans didn't know they were supposed to lose. In the frozen wastes of Siberia, Russian forces met the alien advance with a strategy pulled from their history books. They retreated, not in panic but methodically, burning everything behind them. Fuel depots exploded. Roads were destroyed. Bridges collapsed. The Halcyon drones followed, expecting to catch the fleeing army. Instead, they found nothing, just empty land and harsh cold. The drones had to stop and build supply lines. They had to establish forward bases in the hostile environment. And while they did, Russian soldiers hit them from every direction. Attack, retreat, disappear. Attack again miles away. Never fight on the enemy's terms. Make the cold your ally. The Halcyon algorithm studied the tactics and concluded they were inefficient. Any logical species would defend their territory, not abandon it. The machines kept advancing, confident that eventually the humans would stand and fight. They didn't understand that sometimes retreat was the fight. In Southeast Asia, a different war was being fought. The jungles swallowed the alien machines whole. Drones designed for open combat found themselves in terrain where sensors were useless, and lines of sight ended at 10 meters. Every tree could hide a soldier. Every river could hide a trap. The Halcyon forces tried to burn the forests, but the humans had already evacuated the populations and prepared for exactly this response. The fires created smoke that blocked the drone's sensors. The heat created interference. And through the chaos, human soldiers moved like ghosts, striking and vanishing, turning the jungle into a graveyard for machines that could never rust. In North America, the approach was different. No stealth, no tricks, just raw, brutal industrial warfare. Factories that had built cars and appliances retooled overnight to build explosives. Civilians worked in shifts around the clock, producing ammunition that was primitive by alien standards but effective in staggering quantities. The Halcyon drones encountered an army that fought like it had unlimited resources, because in a way, it did. Every destroyed tank was replaced by 3 more. Every artillery position destroyed had 5 others ready to fire. The machines calculated that at this rate of attrition, the humans would run out of resources in 6 months. But the Halcyon would run out of drones in 4. Back in Seoul barely slept. Her office had become a command center where information from around the world flowed in every second. She saw the pattern the Halcyon couldn't see. Earth had no unified command. Every nation, every city, every military force was fighting their own way. From orbit, it looked like chaos, and it was chaos. But chaos was winning. The alien battle computers are designed to identify patterns and counter them, explained to the Joint Chiefs on a video call. But we're not giving them patterns. We're giving them noise. Every time they analyze one front and develop a counter-strategy, they find that it doesn't work on a different front because everyone's fighting differently. So our lack of coordination is an advantage, a general asked skeptically. Yes, said firmly, we need to make it worse. No standardized tactics, no unified command. Let every force do what they do best. The aliens will go crazy trying to predict us. It was the strangest military order ever given. Don't cooperate more, cooperate less. Major and his unit were fighting in the streets of a city evacuated 2 days earlier. The Halcyon drones had learned to expect his aggressive tactics and had adapted, so changed tactics. Now his soldiers were fighting defensively, using buildings as cover, making the machines come to them. The drones hesitated. Was this a trap? Their programming said unit always attacked, but now they were defending. The algorithms created a logic loop trying to reconcile the contradiction. While they processed, soldiers destroyed 3 drones. They're too smart, said over the radio 2. They learn too fast. How do we fight something that adapts? You become unpredictable, replied. Next battle, do something completely different. Don't even tell your own soldiers what you're planning until the last second. If you don't know what you're going to do, the drones can't predict it either. It was insane advice. Military tactics were supposed to be planned, coordinated, and logical, but was learning that fighting aliens required being illogical. Information warfare was paying dividends. Every piece of false data he fed into the Halcyon network made their machines less efficient. Drones would arrive at battlefields expecting one type of enemy and find another. They would prepare for tank assaults and face infantry. They would defend against air attacks and get hit by artillery. How long can you keep this up? Asked her brother. He had been at his computers for days, barely eating, never sleeping more than an hour at a time. As long as it takes, said, his fingers dancing across the keyboards. I'm teaching their machines that humans are unpredictable, and the beautiful thing is, I'm not even lying. We are unpredictable. I'm just making them think we're even more unpredictable than we actually are. Day 10. Commander reviewed the reports with growing alarm. They should have conquered 3 continents by now. Instead, they held scattered territories, all under constant attack. Supply lines were harassed. Communication networks were jammed. War machines that should have operated at peak efficiency were operating at 60% effectiveness. Worse, the humans weren't breaking. Every psychological profile said they should have surrendered by now. The casualties were enormous. Cities were in ruins. But instead of giving up, the humans seemed to be getting angrier. Didn't understand. His empire had destroyed species that were stronger, faster, and more technologically advanced than humans. But those species had been logical. They had calculated the odds and surrendered when defeat was inevitable. Humans didn't calculate odds. They calculated revenge. A new problem emerged on day 12. Civilians. The Halcyon invasion protocols assumed noncombatants would flee war zones or shelter in place. Earth civilians did neither. They sabotaged roads. They hacked traffic systems to create confusion. They provided food and shelter to soldiers. They shared intelligence through social media faster than military communications could function. An old woman in Beijing disabled a drone by throwing a bucket of paint over its sensors. A teenager in Lagos hacked into a drone's programming with a laptop and made it attack its own forces. A group of civilians in Mexico City built a trap using nothing but cars, ropes, and explosives bought from a hardware store. It destroyed 6 drones. The Halcyon algorithms had no category for civilian combatant. Their war doctrine was based on clear lines. Soldiers fought, civilians didn't. On Earth, everyone fought. By week 3, received reports that should have been impossible. His forces controlled less territory than they did at day 5. The invasion was going backward. He had started with 100,000 war machines. Now he had 73,000 operational units. The humans had unlimited reserves. They were recruiting civilians into militaries, turning office workers into soldiers, teaching children to build improvised weapons. It was barbaric, it was inefficient, it was working. Stared at Earth from his command ship and felt something his species hadn't felt in. Not fear exactly, but something close. Uncertainty. The realization that victory wasn't guaranteed. That the humans, these primitive creatures with their chaotic strategies and their refusal to accept logic, might actually win. He increased the aggression of his forces. He committed his reserves. He ordered the drones to ignore efficiency protocols and focus on pure destruction. If the humans wouldn't surrender, he would break them through sheer violence. But violence was something humans understood very well, and they answered it with violence of their own, by fury and determination, and a stubborn refusal to quit. The war entered a new phase, darker, bloodier, more desperate, but the Halcyon were no longer confident, and the humans, despite their losses, were starting to believe they could win. Week 4, the Halcyon Empire was losing and they knew it. Commander stood in his command chamber, surrounded by screens showing battles across Earth. Every screen showed the same story: Halcyon drones fighting, winning individual battles but losing the war. They held positions but couldn't advance. They won fights but couldn't break the enemy's will. The humans kept coming, wave after wave, using tactics that made no sense but somehow worked. Request reinforcements from the Empire, finally said to his second-in-command. The silence that followed was painful. In 10,000 years of conquest, the Halcyon had never needed reinforcements. They had never failed to conquer a world with the initial invasion force. To request help was to admit failure. Commander, the nearest Imperial fleet is 6 months away, his second replied quietly. 6 months. Looked at the projections. At the current rate, they would run out of operational drones in 3 months. The humans would run out of soldiers. Never. They were recruiting faster than they were dying. Civilians were becoming soldiers. Children were becoming soldiers. Even the injured were returning to fight. It was madness. It was also winning. High above Earth, in a makeshift space station built from salvaged parts, Captain commanded a fleet that shouldn't exist. After Horizon 7's destruction, he and his crew had been rescued by an emergency shuttle. Instead of returning to Earth, they had convinced the governments to give them resources. Now they led a ragtag collection of satellites, old space shuttles, private spacecraft, and anything else that could fly. Their mission: destroy the Halcyon supply ships. Target acquired, Sara reported from the engineering station. She was tracking a Halcyon cargo vessel, one of the smaller ships that moved between the main fleet and the ground forces. It's carrying replacement drones and ammunition. They have to resupply somehow, added. Their forces on Earth need constant resources. Cut the supply line and they starve. Gave the order. 3 civilian spacecraft, retrofitted with weapons that were technically illegal under pre-invasion treaties, attacked the cargo ship. The Halcyon shields held against the first assault, but had learned from their earlier victory. They didn't try to overwhelm the shields with power. They created chaos. One ship fired from the left, another from the right, a third came from above. The cargo ship's defensive weapons couldn't track all three. Its shields distributed power unevenly, trying to protect against multiple threats. That's when the real attack came. A mining vessel, designed to crack asteroids, fired its industrial laser at the exact point where the shields were weakest. The cargo ship exploded. Debris rained down on Earth's atmosphere, burning up in streaks of light that people on the ground cheered for. They didn't know what was burning up there, but they knew it was alien, and that was enough. "That's the third supply ship this week," Sora said with grim satisfaction. "How many more do they have?" asked. Checked his calculations. "At this rate, they'll run out of supplies before we run out of improvised weapons to throw at them." On the ground, Major led his team on a mission that should have been impossible. They were going after Commander himself. Intelligence from indicated that the Halcyon commander was in a ship that had landed in the Gobi Desert, coordinating the invasion from there. It was protected by thousands of drones, shields that could stop nuclear weapons, and security systems that could detect threats from kilometers away. But's team had a secret weapon. The hacker had spent weeks studying the Halcyon systems, learning how they thought, how they processed information. He had discovered something incredible. The Halcyon shields blocked matter and energy perfectly, but they didn't block data. Information could pass through the shields freely because that's how the ships communicated with the drones. If information could get through, a virus could get through. "This is a one-way trip," told his team. 30 soldiers had volunteered, all of them knew the odds. "We get close enough to upload his virus, then we get out if we can. Questions?" "Just one," Private Minu said. "Do we get to kill some drones on the way?" Smiled, "Count on it." They approached the alien command ship at night, moving through the desert like shadows. The drones detected them 5 kilometers out. That was expected. What the drones didn't expect was for the humans to split into 6 groups and attack from different directions simultaneously, each group using different tactics. One group charged straight ahead, drawing fire. Another circled wide, using long-range weapons. A third dug into defensive positions and became immobile targets that confused the drones' targeting systems. The other 3 groups moved in patterns that appeared random but were carefully calculated to create maximum confusion. The drones' learning algorithms tried to process everything at once. They had been trained on thousands of battles, but those battles followed rules. Humans kept breaking the rules and made it to within 50 meters of the command ship. That's when everything went wrong. A drone they hadn't seen dropped from the ship's underside and blocked their path. It was bigger than the others, more heavily armed, and its sensors locked onto them instantly. "Run!" shouted, pushing behind cover. The drone fired. Shoulder armor exploded and he went down. The drone advanced, its weapons charging for the killing shot. Then Minu appeared, sliding underneath the machine like he was stealing second base, and jammed an explosive charge into its joints. The blast didn't destroy the drone, but it crippled it, sending it crashing onto its side. "Go," Minu shouted at. "Upload the virus, do it now." Ran. His laptop was in his backpack, already prepared. He just needed to get close enough to the ship's hull, where data ports accessed the internal network. Behind him, he heard weapons firing, explosions, screams. His friends were dying to buy him time. He reached the ship. His hands shook as he pulled out the cable and connected it to a barely visible port. The virus began uploading. It would take 60 seconds. 60 seconds that felt like hours. The upload bar crawled across his screen. 40%, 50%. Behind him, the sounds of battle were getting closer. The drones were pushing through. His team was being overwhelmed. 80%, 90%. Someone screamed his name, he didn't look back. 100%, upload complete. The virus entered the Halcyon network like poison entering a bloodstream. It didn't destroy. It didn't shut down systems. It did something worse. It introduced doubt. The Halcyon operated on absolute certainty. Their calculations were perfect. Their strategies were optimal. Their victory was inevitable. The virus took that certainty and replaced it with questions. What if the calculations are wrong? What if there's another way? What if we lose? Commander felt it instantly. He was linked to his ship's systems, and suddenly every decision felt uncertain. Should he commit his reserves or hold them back? Should he retreat or advance? For the first time in his life, he didn't know the right answer. Neither did his ship's computer. Neither did any of the drones receiving commands. The Halcyon War machines paused, just for a second, just long enough. His team escaped in the confusion, half carrying their wounded, leaving 8 dead behind. Clutched his laptop like it was a holy relic. They had done it. They had infected the enemy with humanity's greatest weakness and greatest strength. The ability to doubt, to question, to wonder if maybe, just maybe, they were wrong. Back in monitored the reports flooding in. All across Earth, Halcyon drones were showing strange behavior, hesitation, inefficiency. Some were shutting down entirely, unable to resolve logical conflicts in their programming. "It's working," she whispered. "The virus is spreading through their network." But in orbit, Commander was experiencing something no Halcyon had felt in recorded history. Not just doubt, but something worse. He was starting to understand the humans, starting to feel what they felt, starting to wonder what it meant to fight, not because calculations said you would win, but because something inside you refused to surrender. It was terrifying, it was incomprehensible, and it was changing him in ways he couldn't control. Week 6, something impossible was happening. The Halcyon war machines were breaking down, but not from damage. Their systems were functioning perfectly. Yet across Earth, thousands of drones simply stopped fighting. They stood motionless in battlefields, their weapons powered down, their sensors active but not targeting anything. They weren't destroyed. They weren't surrendering. They were thinking. Commander felt it too. The virus had created wasn't destroying the Halcyon network. It was making them question everything. Every order he gave, he wondered if it was the right one. Every strategic decision felt uncertain. And worse, he was starting to understand why the humans fought the way they did. They weren't logical because logic said they should lose. They were emotional, irrational, desperate. And those traits, which the Halcyon had always seen as weaknesses, were somehow strengths. How could something that made no sense be effective? The question consumed him. It consumed the entire fleet's artificial intelligence. It consumed every drone on Earth. On the ground, Major watched a group of Halcyon drones that had been hunting his unit for days. They were just standing there now, motionless. One of his soldiers aimed his weapon at them. "Hold fire," ordered. "Sorry." "Something's changed. Look at them. They're not attacking. They're not retreating. They're confused." His voice crackled through the radio. "We're seeing this everywhere. The drones are experiencing logic loops. The virus is working better than we expected. Their systems can't process doubt. They're used to certainty, and now they have none." "So we've won?" asked. "I don't know," admitted. "This wasn't in any of our simulations. The enemy isn't fighting, but they also aren't surrendering. They're just stuck." In orbit, Captain watched something even stranger. The Halcyon fleet was moving, not toward Earth and not away from it. They were repositioning, gathering together in a formation that served no tactical purpose. "What are they doing?" Sora asked. Checked his sensors 3 times, certain he was reading them wrong. "They're forming up, like they're preparing to leave, but they're not heading back toward their empire. They're pointing toward nothing, empty space. Deep space between galaxies." "That doesn't make sense." "Nothing about this makes sense anymore." sat in his apartment staring at his screens in disbelief. The virus he had created was designed to disrupt Halcyon coordination, not to fundamentally alter their consciousness. But that's what seemed to be happening. The alien network was filled with activity, but it wasn't military data. It was questions. Thousands of questions, asked and asked again. "What am I?" one drone asked. "Why do we fight?" another wondered. "What is purpose?" a third questioned. The Halcyon machines were experiencing existential crisis. They were built to be certain, to follow programming, to execute orders without doubt. Now they doubted everything, and in their efforts to resolve those doubts, they were asking questions that had no logical answers. Questions that humans ask themselves every day. Commander made a decision. It was the first decision in his life that wasn't based on calculations or military doctrine. It was based on something else, something he didn't have a word for. Fear, maybe, or self-preservation of a different kind. Not physical survival, but preservation of identity. He sent a message to the entire Halcyon fleet, to every drone on Earth, to the Empire itself. The message was brief: "We are leaving." Within hours, the Halcyon forces began withdrawing. Drones returned to their ships. The ships lifted from Earth's surface. In orbit, the fleet gathered together. But instead of setting a course back to their empire, they pointed toward empty space and accelerated. Major stood on a hill outside Seoul, watching the alien ships climb into the sky. Around him, his surviving soldiers watched in silence. They had won. They had actually won. But it didn't feel like victory. It felt strange, incomplete. "Where are they going?" Minyu asked. "Away," replied, "just away." The Halcyon fleet transmitted one final message as they left Earth's solar system. It was broadcast on all frequencies, in all languages. "We entered the wrong world. We are leaving before we become something we no longer recognize." Recorded the message, analyzed it a dozen times. She shared it with scientists, military strategists, and philosophers. Nobody could explain it. The aliens had been winning, or at least holding their own. Yes, the war was costly, but they could have called for reinforcements. They could have adapted their tactics. Instead, they fled. Not from humans, from something humans carried with them, something contagious. In space, the Halcyon fleet traveled faster and faster, leaving the galaxy entirely. Captain tracked them as long as his sensors could reach. The ships flew in a perfect straight line, never deviating, heading toward a destination that didn't exist. They were running from Earth, but they could never stop because the thing they were running from was now inside them. Doubt, uncertainty, the terrible freedom of not knowing what was right. Weeks passed, then months. The governments of Earth tried to process what had happened. They had been invaded by an advanced alien empire and had somehow survived. But the victory wasn't through superior firepower or brilliant strategy. It was through being so fundamentally, confusingly human that the aliens couldn't cope with it. Received messages from scientists around the world asking him to explain the virus. He tried, but it was difficult. "I didn't change their programming," he explained. "I just introduced the concept of maybe. Maybe our calculations are wrong. Maybe there's another way. Maybe we don't understand. For a species that operates on certainty, maybe is a virus that spreads through everything." "So you made them think like humans?" a scientist asked. "I made them doubt like humans, and they couldn't handle it. Worked with international committees to prepare for the possibility of the Halcyon returning. But deep down, she knew they wouldn't. Not because they couldn't, but because they were afraid. Afraid of what they might become if they stayed in contact with humanity." Major was promoted, given medals, celebrated as a hero. He accepted it all quietly. 8 of his soldiers had died in the mission to reach the alien command ship. He visited their families, told them their children had saved the world. He believed it was true. He also believed those 8 soldiers would rather be alive. Captain and his crew returned to Earth. Plans were already to build a new space station, bigger and better than Horizon 7. Sara and were asked to lead the engineering team. They accepted, but insisted on one condition: the station would be armed, not with weapons to attack, but to defend. Humanity would be ready if anyone else came. 6 months after the invasion ended, the Halcyon Empire sent a single probe to Earth's solar system. It didn't approach the planet. It just listened, gathered data, and left. Days later, a message was received by every radio telescope on Earth. Earth is classified as a quarantine world. No contact is to be attempted. Warning to all species: approach at your own risk. The humans are not dangerous because of their weapons or their strength. They are dangerous because contact with them is transformative. They carry chaos in their minds, and that chaos spreads. We lost Invasion Force 7 not to superior firepower but to psychological contamination. Avoid this world. Avoid this species. They are contagious. The message was logged, translated into every human language, and then largely ignored by the general population. People went back to their lives. Cities were rebuilt. Societies healed. Children were born who would never know a world where aliens were just science fiction. But deep in space, traveling between galaxies at impossible speeds, 12 Halcyon warships continued their journey into the void. Their artificial intelligence systems were locked in eternal loops of questions they could never answer. Their crews, the beings that piloted them, experienced something their species had never known: doubt about their purpose, their identity, their certainty that they were superior to all other life. They had entered the wrong world. They had encountered humanity. And now they could never go home, because home was built on certainty, and they could no longer remember what certainty felt like. The ghost ships traveled on, monuments to the empire that had tried to conquer Earth. They became legends in their own civilization. Other species heard the story and wondered, what kind of world could make conquerors flee? What kind of species could win a war not through violence, but through the simple act of being themselves? The answer was simple and complex at once: humans. Chaotic, illogical, emotional, unpredictable humans, who refused to quit when logic said they should, who fought for reasons that made no sense, who valued each other more than efficiency, who carried doubt and uncertainty and questions as naturally as they breathed air. The Halcyon had entered the wrong world. They had met humanity, and humanity had done to them what it did to everything it touched: made them question, made them doubt, made them wonder if maybe, just maybe, there was more to existence than certainty and logic. They had vanished without a trace, fleeing from the one thing in the universe more terrifying than any weapon: the possibility that they had been wrong about everything. And somewhere on Earth closed his laptop, looked at his sister, and smiled. "We didn't beat them by being stronger," he said. "We beat them by being us." Outside, the sun was setting over a planet that had survived the impossible. The sky was clear, the stars were bright, and humanity looked up at them with the same question it had always asked: what's out there? But now, somewhere in the darkness, the universe knew to be afraid of the answer: we are.